What are some techniques and strategies you think that salespeople, maybe not necessarily real estate people, can use in their everyday business to put themselves at ease?
So the first one would be to practice total and complete acceptance of any situation, any person, including yourself. Total and complete acceptance of any situation and any person, including yourself. I think that's a super valuable thing to take on.
And in the same form and fashion, I guess, the perfect game, I think that's what you called it, the perfect game, everything's perfect. Can you share what that is for everybody who's listening?
The perfect game comes into play. So whatever's offered, you accept it. Whatever's suggested, you do it. And whatever happens, you laugh and you declare it perfect. And it turns out that if you will be in this gracious, kind, accepting, loving mode, mimicking, mirroring, and matching, as you were talking about, but also asking questions and really being curious, and then you open yourself up to express what it is that you want, people will give you ideas and hints that seem totally outrageous. They seem completely off track. Like your brain goes, how's that going to lead to this? But it's really important to know that the drunk monkey in your head should not be trusted.
World-class lessons from the real estate industry's top 1%, empowering agents to think bigger and do more to create life by design. You get access to exclusive interviews with top producing real estate professionals. Listen in as we talk about their journey into business, best practices, and lessons learned. Hosted by Kiro Nasrallah and John Scipione.
I mean, one thing that we always say in our office is just action is better than perfection, right?
This is Light It Up with Lighthouse Residential.
Welcome back to another episode of the Light It Up podcast. Today's episode, we have with us an absolute legend. Matthew Ferry is a spiritual teacher and happiness expert who helps people break free of negative thought patterns so that they can have reduced stress and enjoy life. Matthew Ferry is the creator of Rapid Enlightenment Process and the best-selling author of Quiet Mind and Epic Life. Books right here. Escape the Status Quo and Experience Enlightened Prosperity Now. Matthew also authored Creating Sales Velocity for all the realtors who are listening to this and who have obsessed over it like I have. This is going to be exciting. So thank you for coming on, Matthew.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here. You know, Creating Sales Velocity was such an important moment for me because it's when I sort of gelled that sales was not just skill, but it was also who you were being and more of a contextual or spiritual perspective, and that when people adopted that, their sales increased rapidly.
Yeah, it's that audio. I've listened to it probably a half a dozen times, and as we were coming in here, John was giving me like a heads up. He was like, "Listen, you can't fangirl." You can't fangirl on Matthew. You have to just, ask him questions that people who are listening to it will understand. You can't be like, teach me this NLP thing or do this.
Well, the beauty of having this podcast and this platform is we get to interact with people that have been mentors to us as we've grown our businesses. And what happens is we find out sometimes 20 minutes into the episode, we end up making it a therapy session.
Therapy. John's therapy.
We need it. About our own businesses or our own questions, and we realize that we need to make this more of a broad-based question and answer sort of platform.
So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right into the lightning round questions. I'm honestly struggling to find a couple questions.
I've got a good one to start with.
All right, let's do it.
Matthew, what fear have you outgrown?
I would say it will sound exaggerated and crazy, but all fear. It turns out that fear is all related to the fear of death. And as my mind went quiet and I began to have this sort of progressive realization of oneness, fear itself began to feel biological, inauthentic, not real. And slowly I started to be able to put words to it and to begin to transcend it. And actually, that is the foundation of the rapid enlightenment process, is to essentially transcend your fear so that you can behave in accordance with your intentions and achieve the goals that are important and valuable to you.
Wow, great answer.
I almost want to skip these and dive right into my questions.
Go on your question. Well, you can ask just one more.
All right. If you can have dinner with 3 people, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Well, that's interesting. I think I'd like to have dinner with Oprah Winfrey. I think she's a really interesting character for me because she has what I term as enlightened prosperity. She has achieved prosperity, by any person's metric, and yet she's striving constantly, at least in what we know of her in the public, striving for inner peace and satisfaction and joy. Like all of us, I don't know how much she has it, but clearly she's striving for it. I think she would be an interesting character. I would love to have had dinner with Steve Jobs. One of his mentors was one of my father's mentors, a man named Mike Vance. And so we heard a lot about Steve Jobs from Mike back in the day. And so I think, just that creative mind, the courageous mind, the willing to break all the status quo mind would be why I would want to have dinner with him. And then who else? Probably the third person would be Earl Nightingale. And Earl Nightingale is also dead. But Earl Nightingale is my father's mentor. And apparently when I was 5 years old, he sat me on his lap and I set my very first goal. And I'd love to have a discussion with him about traditional goal setting versus what I now coin as enlightened goal setting. And I'd love to banter with him on the merits of setting goals that create stress versus setting goals that create peace.
The goal that you set on his lap when you were 5 years old, was that to get the bicycle?
That was the bike. Yep, that's correct.
So speaking about that, tell us a little bit about, so Matthew, one of the biggest things, and interestingly enough, I've never actually met you or, you've never spoken in an audience, but your legacy of what you've taught in the Mike Ferry organization was taught down to me from other agents. So you've lived through, even though you weren't inside of the organization when I was there, to the point where I had Baruch music and scripts in the background and I would sleep listening to it because they were like, Matthew said it works, so we do it. I'm like, okay. And I'd record it. But there's such an impact that you've had, and it's almost like Mike was teaching everybody sales skills and you were like, this is how we do it on steroids. And this is just that millimeter change that makes the world of a difference. And I think it's good to give people who are listening to this some reference. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. It was created by Richard Bandler and John Grinder.
John Grinder, yeah.
And that was in the 1970s. And basically the way that they found out about this NLP is they were just studying people who either had phobias, people who had really good influence, good leaders, and they were saying, well, just because I communicate this way doesn't mean that person's going to comprehend it that way. And there's a way to communicate with everybody that can actually, they can absorb all that information. How were you exposed, Matthew, to NLP, and how did you go about bringing it into the MFO system? Because all the scripts have NLP all over it.
Great question. Yeah, great question. For me, when you are the son of a personal development guru, you really have no choice. You study everything. And NLP was one of those things, Tony Robbins would talk about it, and I thought that was interesting. But I hired my own coach. Actually, my father hired for my brother and I our own personal coach. And we went deep into the linguistics. What is the language that makes it easy for people to stay with you and stay in your presence and not be agitated and angry and upset. And it turns out that there are no jerks in the world until you show up and communicate the way that you communicate and agitate them, essentially. And so that was really, really powerful and very transformative for me. So much so that I decided to, after about, maybe 7 or 8 years of really working on my own mastery with it, I decided to bring it out and start teaching it to other people. And it was one of the most successful things that I had done at that time. These days, I have actually licensed the entire process and methodology to one of my mentees, who's actually my ex-brother-in-law, a man named Bill Pipes, who currently is working under the banner of Agent Academy. And so he's now carrying the torch and doing my full NLP training program, which is it's pretty exciting to have that come back after all these years, because I had wholly and completely moved on from teaching those skills. And yet there's some of the most valuable and empowering skills that I ever learned when it came to being able to communicate in a way that had people feel at ease so that they could say yes if it was appropriate to say yes.
Yeah. I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but on the Mike Ferry app, if you go to over the phone prospecting, there's 4 recordings that are 45 minutes each, and you have Matthew on there. By tape 2, he's mimicking accents, role-playing it with Tom, where if someone's speaking fast, you're speaking fast. If someone has an accent, you speak with an accent. And the only reason why I was exposed to that is the top agent in our marketplace. I was asking him, I was like, what's your secret? He's like, role play more, Kiro, role play more. I'm like, it's not role playing, man. Tell me what's the secret. He's like, listen, all I really do is just mirror and match. Matthew teaches all of that. Go find like some of the recordings. I'm like, okay. So I found it, and I was blown away, because if you were to listen to it, you're like, it's 2 Asian guys. There's no way. it's gonna be, but it's so powerful, because when you actually use it and you overcome it, like that fear of being, detected, they don't notice it, but they feel so attached to you and so connected to you.
Could I also say that that it is a back end way, like you back into by mirroring and matching people, you back into one of the most important components of experiencing peace of mind, and that is acceptance. And that really mimicking, mirroring, and matching is like a physical expression of accepting and honoring people exactly as they are. And it turns out that one of the reasons that we experience stress and anxiety and upset and anger is that we resist. We resist the world, we resist ourselves, we resist other people. And so, sort of without even realizing it, I mean, you can imagine that for me, I had sort of always had this lean towards peace of mind and joy and play and like just having fun and being creative in anything that I did. When I was 9 years old, I had these crazy experiences where I felt like I was leaving my body, and I probably wasn't, but that's what it felt like. And the experience was just this incredible bliss and peace. And so my whole life, like when I track back, I realized, wow, actually, that was really important, right? That actually guided almost everything I did. And so for me, mimicking, mirroring, and matching was a way in which I could be harmonious while I was in the sales process. And that was so valuable, so important. It led to so many incredible insights that I write about in my latest book.
Yeah, I love that. It's also when you go into parts of the training to like help people get over their limiting beliefs, you say, make 100 calls and say, you're not interested in selling your house, are you? And then just hang up. But then when you start realizing that there's small tweaks that you can make, but you just have to believe that you can actually go through it, it makes the world of a difference. And in the same form and fashion, I guess, the perfect game, I think that's what you called it, the perfect game, everything's perfect. Can you share what that is for everybody who's listening? Because I've been playing
No
it for as
problem.
long as John knows me, and he hates me for it because whenever we go out to a restaurant to order, I'm like, whatever you recommend.
Yep.
perfect
And
game.
that's symbolic, right? You're practicing a form of surrender and gratitude for what is, and so, by way of background, I've had the privilege of coaching more than 10,000 people over the last 30 years.
Damn, that's crazy.
Sometimes in groups of 4 or 5. A lot of times it's one-on-one. But one of the things that I found was that um, people were angry and resistant, hoping that if they made sales, they would be happy and delighted. Then they would, one, be angry and resistant, so making sales was much harder, which made them more angry and more resistant. Then if they were like strong enough and forceful enough and angry enough and could push enough and could destroy themselves enough, then they did make sales. Then they made the sales only to discover now they'd made all the sales and they're still angry and resistant. Brutal. So I began to invent little processes, little games that they could play to assist themselves and me. I was like, I was always the test case dummy, but the perfect game was really one of those things. And really, it's very simple. It's like you are clear about what you want. So you go through a goal setting process and you get clear about what your goals are. Then when you're out in the world, you are connecting deeply with people, you're mimicking, mirroring, and matching, you're seeing if you can make a difference, if you can be supportive of other people. Essentially, you're not attached to your own stuff. So you like put your own stuff back here and you're mimicking, mirroring, matching. You're being in a state of acceptance and appreciation of them and what their goals and dreams are and what they want. Well, inevitably, what happens is people start to ask you about what you want, and you have to be ready. And so you start telling people about what your goals and dreams are, and naturally, people want to contribute, and that's where the perfect game comes into play. So whatever's offered, you accept it. Whatever's suggested, you do it, and whatever happens, you laugh and you declare it perfect. And it turns out that if you will be in this gracious, kind, accepting, loving mode, mimicking, mirroring, and matching, as you were talking about, but also asking questions and really being curious, and then you open yourself up to express what it is that you want, people will give you ideas and hints that seem totally outrageous. They seem completely off track. Like your brain goes, how's that going to lead to this? But it's really important to know that the drunk monkey in your head should not be trusted. All that talking in your head is really just a survival system. That's it. So you don't rely on it for inspiration. You rely on it for, if you're in trouble, how do you get out of it? But the drunk monkey's talking constantly, so that's a little troublesome. If you will just accept what is offered and do what is suggested, when you are in rapport with someone and you've been supportive to them and now they want to be supportive to you, it'll blow your mind, the fast track that puts you on.
Yeah. Did you get that, John?
Yeah. So how do you get in rapport with them without? So are you saying it's in the early stages of a conversation? Like I'm thinking, if you're sitting across the table from somebody in a sales situation, right? We both are obviously in the real estate business. If you're sitting across from a seller, how do you get in rapport with them? How do you mirror or match them without giving up the terms or listing it at a price that's not favorable or a commission that's not favorable?
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna see if I can put what you're saying into a different context. What I hear you say is, if I get into this rapport-based state where I'm in acceptance and appreciation of who they are, will I become weak and compromise my own values? And the answer is yes. If you are weak and you tend to compromise your own values, it doesn't matter what we do. We have to actually make a commitment. You have to decide that I am going to stand up for myself, and I'm going to stand up for this seller. I am going to make sure that this seller gets the result that they want, which means I'm going to say a bunch of things they don't want to hear. And then I am going to be willing to receive their negativity without making them wrong, without resisting, without getting hostile, without reacting. I'm going to understand. Of course they're upset. They just missed the market by 6 months and it's sliding fast. They're upset. They're living in the past. They're upset. That's okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to make suggestions that they list their home at a price that will cause it to sell, and that they offer a commission that will incentivize the other agents to sell their home over the other houses that are coming on the market. And so I'm going to give them a choice, but I'm also going to be detached. Remember that attachment is an exaggerated fear of losing an imaginary benefit. And when we are living in those imaginary benefits, we tend to be more aggressive and potentially resistant, sometimes even angry or hostile. And those are guaranteed ways to lose a listing.
Can you repeat that one more time? Because that's so golden. Attachment is?
It's an exaggerated fear of losing an imaginary benefit. So we imagine some benefit in the future. Let's call it taking the listing at a price that'll cause it to sell at a commission that is worthy of our time. And so there's an attachment. We have this vision, like I want that, but we don't even just say I want the sale at a good commission. We actually have an attachment to what that means. Like, what is that future? In essence, so often we've already spent the money. We haven't even got the listing. We've spent it in our head.
Right.
Then that creates an illusion that we're living inside of. The drunk monkey in our head goes like, I want that. Don't take that away from me. So now if you're on the presentation and you have the tiniest little bit of insecurity pop up, here comes the drunk monkey into attack mode. Which then, of course, pushes the client away even farther.
Yeah. And one of the things that you teach is that you have to pace, and lead with excitement and enthusiasm. And you can't lead when you're nervous, because then you sound weird, right? Like, yes. And you can't do it as an authority figure that someone's looking up to. Wow, your response was a lot deeper than I was thinking to John's question. So,
well, when we got on the line, you had said, Matthew, I want to introduce you as mindset teacher, blah blah blah, and I was saying, that mindset was a really important part of my evolution. Just like NLP was a very important part of my evolution, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And then it turns out that mindset and mindset techniques don't quite have the wherewithal to go through the really dark, hard periods of our lives when everything's falling apart. It's very, very difficult. It takes tremendous energy to maintain your mindset. And that was annoying to me. And as I continued my own research, I started to have the realization that a spiritual awakening, which is not a religious thing, it's actually awakening to a new context, that the result of which has you release your fear and come to a place of peace and flow. So the spiritual awakening created this new context. The context enables you to be in complete disaster, have everything falling apart, and then you get to be at peace in that process, which is strange at first, but delicious nonetheless. And when you are at peace in the middle of a disaster, your creativity, your resourcefulness, your personal power, your energy and enthusiasm soar, and there's no work necessary. Yeah. Mindset, you have to work. You basically are trying to train the drunk monkey to be something that it isn't. The drunk monkey doesn't give a rip about you, doesn't care about happiness and peace, doesn't care about productivity. The drunk monkey cares about survival. So it's just going to be constantly whispering in your ear, you're a loser, you're stupid, you need to do more, what's wrong with you, you're a fraud, everybody's going to figure this out, right? Like, and those, by the way, the drunk, as far as the drunk monkey is concerned, like that's a motivational seminar right there. But when you pop into a new state where you begin to connect with the idea that all is well, that's what I talk about in my book, Quiet Mind, Epic Life. When you start to pop into the idea that all is well, even when everything is falling apart, well, then your personal power and your resourcefulness go up exponentially.
The thought in my mind, it's because I obsessed over the NLP stuff for so long. I even use it in my dating life, personal life, professional life, and it was just like a way of everything that I used to do. What you just said, I pictured myself in a car, and it's like NLP is like nice rims, the cool body kit, but then, having that oneness is almost like a new engine. It's like you could go anywhere with this new engine, but everything else, it just looks good, but you're not yourself where you can handle the terrain that's ahead or whatever the case it is. You think you know who you are, but you don't really know who you are. And I guess that's the hardest thing, because when you're practicing all those things, you're adapting to be a mirror instead of being your true self. So how do you tap into that?
That's such a good question to distinguish. When all is well, then you're not attached to who you are, and you're able to shapeshift in the environment to support the people around you in not feeling uncomfortable and not feeling agitated or scared. And that's a tremendous service to bring to the people around you, the buyers and the sellers. If they can feel at ease getting the crap kicked out of them, which is what's happening now to the sellers, and the buyers are getting hammered by the interest rates. So if they can feel at ease in that process because they're working with you, because you are at ease, that's a huge benefit. And that'll lead to a lot of referrals.
What are some techniques and strategies you think that salespeople, maybe not necessarily real estate people, can use in their everyday business to put themselves at ease? Is there like a quick reset?
Yeah, well, there's a series of daily practices in my book, Quiet Mind, Epic Life, that I would highly recommend. And they essentially go through a couple of different processes. Let me just give you a few that people could take on. So the first one would be to practice total and complete acceptance of any situation, any person, including yourself. Total and complete acceptance of any situation and any person, including yourself. I think that's a super valuable thing to take on. The other thing, and by the way, unbelievably difficult, right? Very, very challenging, but a worthy pursuit nonetheless. Mimicking, mirroring, and matching is essentially a basic version of that. The second thing that I would recommend that people take on is a little bit of a mantra. And I would say that the mantra itself just begins to change the context. It's a form of recontextualization. And the mantra is this: it's always going my way, even when it's not. And the reason that we say that is that generally people who are interested in this kind of conversation are not at the bottom of the barrel. They're not having the worst life ever. They're not born in situations that are horrendous and terrible and giving them an incredible disadvantage. They're listening to this because they're wanting to improve. They're wanting to become. That's who your listener is. And I would say that person tends to continue to grow and get better and better and better, sort of whether they want to or not. But it's the time frames that we get jammed up on. So there's no bad goals, there's just bad deadlines.
Yeah.
So, for example, I've had the goal to start the Center for Rapid Enlightenment since 2017. We finally got the paperwork done in 2019. We didn't do our first funding until 2021, and the truth is we didn't even have our first real meeting until a few days ago. And there were times in which I was beating myself up a little bit, and then it wasn't really me, it was the drunk monkey who was trying to give me a motivational seminar, right? It's like, you got to get on this, Matthew. The world deserves it, and you need to make a difference for people, right? And all of that false urgency really is just tied back to the fear of death. And so it was the utilization of accepting the situation as it is, and recognizing there are no bad goals. There's just bad deadlines, that it's always going my way, even when it's not, that I was able to go, okay, no, it's all good. It's all coming together. Just relax.
Yeah.
There's nothing that needs to actually get done here. That's all an illusion. I think that those two things would help. The other thing that I would say for most salespeople is just, could you just please lower the bar? Will you quit holding yourself accountable to standards that don't exist in the world, standards that the drunk monkey in your head is arbitrarily using to beat you up and make you wrong and turn you into a stupid person, or you're a fraud or not good enough, or other people are better than me. All of those standards are lies. They're invented. They're not true.
Yeah.
What if you lowered the bar so low that you could hit it, and you could hit it over and over and over and over? For me, I did this when I was wanting to meditate every day. And ultimately what I found was that meditation agitated me, which is the exact opposite of what you would think. But I would sit there in meditation and then my mind would go crazy. And so I decided to lower the bar. And I said, okay, as long as I take 3 long, slow, deep breaths, then it's complete. I've meditated. So for, a week or two, I would take 3 long, slow, deep breaths every day, and then I would open my eyes and high-five myself, hey, I meditated. But eventually, I would take 3 long, slow, deep breaths, and then at the end of the 3rd breath, I would say, I'm complete, and then something inside of me would say, well, it's okay to take another breath. And eventually, after more than 700 days in a row of meditating, my meditations were sometimes going 4 hours long.
Wow.
And the ecstasy and the joy and the peace and the positive energy that I was feeling was so unbearable, so unbelievable, that I never wanted it to stop. But that started with lowering the bar so low it was impossible not to hit.
I love what you said, because there's 2 things here that stand out. Number one, Abraham Hicks with the mantra. It's almost like you took the best practices that you experienced and you're like, I'm going to make this as my strategy. Because it was just hitting me now, through MFO, through shadowing Thatch at one point a couple of years ago, even when we went to an EXP retreat, it's like everywhere we go, you leave an imprint on there, right? But it's not something that you strive to do. It's just the effect that you have when you're in that state. And it almost comes back to, I remember when I was meditating, I do transcendental meditation, and they tell you that, even if you don't do it at the right time, even if you're drunk, you still do it. If you forgot to do it after 8 hours from the morning, just, do it right before you sleep. It doesn't need to be perfect, but the voice inside your head, the drunk monkey, is just like, you fucked it up. So now you gotta restart all over again. And then you're going hard on yourself. But then the second you're just like, you just do it, at the end of it, you feel 10 times better. And you're like, that was awesome. But it's just that first step of not having a standard and just saying, this is what I committed to. And like you said, decide. So all other options are out. And you had this one really good quote and I'm sorry, I keep referencing back to the Creating Sales Velocity, but that's just so good.
I love that book. That was an instrumental book in my progression.
Yeah, it's you said when someone decides and commits,
providence moves too. I was actually quoting someone else actually at the end of my book, one of my absolute favorite quotes, and that is that until one is committed, there is hesitance, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness, and yet the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too.
Can you explain what that means for the average Joe?
Absolutely. There's something about making a commitment, saying it out loud, that sort of registers it in the network of all the people around you. You become known for that, which starts to create sort of an accountability structure that you weren't necessarily making, but it just starts to happen. It's like when you guys decided to put on this show, you started to say, hey, we're thinking about putting on this show. And then you started talking about it a bunch. And then it like all these things, just like all these unexpected meetings and people you didn't know were going to help, and the right people just started to show up. And it's this synchronicity that starts to occur. Dr. Hawkins, one of my main mentors in his book, A.K.A, says that miracles are essentially what occurs when your consciousness goes up. When your consciousness goes up, there are these unexpected, unexplainable good fortunes that occur. And part of what has your consciousness goes up is making commitments to things that are really important to you. So you become more aligned within yourself. That's probably an over explanation, but there you go.
No, it's perfectly explained. And now the biggest struggle is when you become aware of, when you're committing and really what you end up telling yourself, really you end up attracting as well. What are some ways that someone can combat? Because it's almost like you find yourself down that rabbit hole where the drunk monkey is just like going at it, just like, it's like you can't get that thought out of your mind, and it's causing you to focus on the bad and you're getting more of the bad. What's like an exercise or a practice just to get that to stop right away?
Well, first of all, there is a surprisingly positive benefit of negativity. And most people think that the way to positivity is to be more positive, and it turns out it's exactly the opposite. The way to be more positive is to intentionally be negative. And so when you are willing to understand what is the motivation of the drunk monkey in your head, why is it repetitiously giving you this thought that this is a negative thought, you don't like this thought? Well, if you try to resist it with positivity, I don't know if you've ever done this or not, but like you try to do affirmations, for example, and it's like, I am powerful and I like myself. The drunk monkey literally comes swinging out of the jungle and says, yeah, and you're a moron and you're an idiot and you can like yourself all you want, but you're a fraud. So when you try to fight negativity with positivity, it is a form of resistance. What you resist will persist. What you accept will transform. So you actually work to celebrate the negativity in your head, to understand it. That's what I talk about in my book, Quiet Mind, Epic Life. Through my research, I began to realize that thought itself had a motivation, and that if you could understand what the motivation of the thought was, you could actually change things at the level of the motivation. What positivity and affirmation and visualization and dream boards and goal setting and all of those things are trying to do is they're trying to deal with the plant. But what actually needs to occur is you go to the root. So you go find the negativity and you become fully and completely aligned with it. In other words, the same as mimicking, mirroring, and matching. You recognize and honor and appreciate that you are a greedy, scared jerk. And that your greed is the fear of not having enough and not looking good and not fitting in. And then you go, well, why? And then you realize, oh, wow, okay, so if I don't have enough and I don't look good and I don't fit in, then I might not get a woman. And then you're like, well, why does that matter? And then you're like, well, wait a second, I'm a genetic meat puppet. My entire existence is about finding a mate so that I can reproduce my genes. And then you're like, well, wait a second, like, is that really what my intention is? It's like, I'm going to be mad that I'm not going to get as many listings that I want because I'm not going to get laid and have babies? What the hell is going on here? And you track it back and you start to realize greed, grudge, hatred, victim, illogical rules, humble, traitor, pride, resistance, and lazy, the 10 hidden motives to survive, are running the show. And when you can honor and appreciate and accept how valuable those things are in your survival-based existence, if you can really understand them, then you can transcend them and connect with your thriving-based existence. We could call that thriving-based existence enlightened prosperity.
It's beautiful how you said that, and the thought that came to my mind is during the pandemic, like right around March, everything stopped, and then I was reading a bunch of Ray Dalio's books, and I was freaking out. I was just like, "Oh, it's all gone down the shitter. We're screwed." And then I was just like sitting in my apartment. I'm like, "Oh God, what's gonna happen after this? Am I gonna have to move in with my parents? Does that mean that I'm gonna just like die alone? And then after that, there's nothing after that?" I remember where I was reading it, but then I went into that thought process where I was just like, huh, what's so bad about going there? And then I'd be like, all right, well, I'd be there, but then what's be so bad about that? And then you just go into it, and there was no fear. It was just like, okay, and if that's a risk, it's just I need to, I know what I need to do, and that's not really a fear. You just realize that there's nothing to be actually scared of. It's just a thought that just lingering that has no substance, and it was easy to actually move it around. When you resist the thought, you're 100% right. It tends to be so much more prominent, and it's almost like it takes roots. Yeah. And if you don't address it, then it starts to fester to this thing that's not really what it is. It's an illusion. That's so good.
Yeah, you expand it by resisting it. Yeah. You make it worse by resisting it. When you accept negativity exactly as it is, then you can face what you did as a process that I talk about in my book called facing the worst case scenario. And when you face the worst case scenario, you deactivate the drunk monkey. And because the drunk monkey's job is essentially like, if there's danger, if there's something bad that's going to happen, then the mind talks. Mm-hmm. So the mind only talks if something is being perceived like something negative is going to happen. Now, if you take that statement in that I just said, that the mind only talks when there is some perceived threat, well, then you probably need to step back and go like, holy shit, my mind is talking all the time.
Yeah.
Meaning, if we play it out, it's possible that I am accidentally in a threat state all the time, except there's no actual threat occurring. So there's all these techniques that I've developed to assist you in essentially addressing the drunk monkey and deactivating its motivation to talk so that you can enter into that incredibly blissful state that I call quiet mind. Yeah. And when you are there, you can move in with your parents, take advantage of that situation, optimize it, and turn it into something even better. And you can be in this place where you say, breakdown is the beginning of breakthrough, that success is a series of well-managed breakdowns. Ooh, this is a pretty good breakdown. High five. Wow, I'm in a really crappy spot. I wonder what good will come out of this. All of a sudden, it completely recontextualizes your entire reality.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of times that worst case scenario really isn't that bad.
It isn't. It's just the illusion, and you resisting it makes it even worse.
It's just the self-sabotage that piles up by not facing it.
Yep, absolutely. Matthew, can you, and this is one thing I wanted to ask initially because it's always been in my mind and how to exercise it. You and Trevor used to do this thing with the visualization. And I know that through your time with, writing sales velocity and creating sales velocity and moving forward from there to quiet mind, I know that you've evolved the way you've been doing the meditation. I mean, the visualization. I know that you guys used to do it at night or in the morning, and now it was like right after a workout. It's almost like a mixture of priming. Can you share how that is and how that works and how someone can actually do it the right way?
You bet. Yeah. One of the things that I noticed about my son is that without any encouragement of mine, he was fearful that he wasn't going to get what he wanted. And this was maybe 5, 6 years old. It became clear to me that At least that was when the idea started, but then I started to do my own research on it. It became clear to me at that time that human beings are hardwired to assume that they aren't going to get what they want and that it's going to be harder than they want. And so with Trevor, I started to play a game to help him. And the game was purely just to help him like break apart this idea. And we called it Trevor's Visualizing Game. I wrote about it in that book. And it's essentially, we would pick something stupid, something irrelevant, something neither of us cared about, something trivial. And then we would visualize it for a moment. And then we would be delighted. We would go out into the world and wonder when it was going to show up. And so we would visualize, let's say, a snail, right? He's 5 at the time. Then we would go out into the world, and all of a sudden he'd be like, Dad, look, there's a snail, right? And he was like, okay, great. We visualized it, and there it was. You can see it in your mind. What you see in your mind, you can create. Now, of course, life is much more complex than that. But the root idea is what I was trying to establish. And it's something that I think is very enriching and valuable, especially at the beginning stages of your process. This is why I'm such a huge fan of Jerry and Esther Hicks and their law of attraction process. I think that's a beginning place. That's a place in which you can start to build confidence that you are the creative force creating, and that when you visualize things, it's more like in the law of attraction modality, you're a beginner. So as a beginner, we have to pretend like you're doing stuff. And then as you become more advanced, you start to surrender to, oh, wait, I am the stuff that is being done, which is different. So I'm not the creator of my goals. I am, in essence, the goals being created. And if I can surrender to that, then I get into this flow that is unbelievably delicious. We just did a Enlightened Goal Setting workshop, actually, last weekend, and I took 70 people through this process of getting aligned within themselves so that it was easier to have their goals come. But for our viewer, our listener, I actually have a full Enlightened Goal Setting workshop on YouTube with a link to download the full workbook. So if they would like to do that as my gift to them.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. The in the book, Esther Hicks wrote, I think it was Asking You Shall Receive. It's not simple. It's like when you read through it, I guess I'm being too critical of every word that was being said in there, because they were saying, do not meditate for more than 20 minutes. I'm like, TM is 40 minutes a day. And I'm like, God damn it, does this mean I can't do it anymore? And Abraham Hicks meditation is like 13 minutes. But when you're in alignment, it's like even at one of Thatch's workshops, and I know that you guys used to do this together, you'd hold the string with a little pendulum at the end, and you just think of the numbers and it would swing, and you're just attracting it to move, and you're in a state of alignment when you're doing that, and the energy is just vibrating through you. But it's a lot of work to remain there, because there's I forget how they say it, but there's the journey is through the challenges, and you're the creator of the whole thing. So you just have to constantly be in alignment, and it's I guess I need to reread that whole book, because it's so difficult. I feel like it's.
I would recommend that you step up. I think you're probably ready to go to the next level, and the next level is to acknowledge that you are the creative force creating, and that the goals that you have are not yours at all, and that you are somehow organized or optimized biologically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually in a way that is predisposed to these goals that are coming through you. Not everybody, for example, in real estate is interested in putting on a professionally done podcast like you are doing now. Like there's something about you that has broadcaster, personality, entertainer, educator, right? Like you have that inside of you. Not everybody has that. And so when you set goals that are not in alignment, it's very difficult, and it's easy to do that. Go to a seminar, they'll tell you what goals to set. You'll feel like shit for the next year. But for you, if you go inward and you meditate, and for you 40 minutes, and you let the goals come out, and then you transcribe them, and then you find your alignment with them, it's more likely that you'll have an enjoyable experience of creating. It doesn't mean that the goals will get created. For goals to be created, one actually has to be structure oriented. You have to have a very effective relationship with integrity. You need to understand about systems, processes, procedures, workflows. You've got to understand how to talk, what to say, what to do. You have to meet the right people, know the right people, put the right systems in place. Having goals be achieved is really the domain of reality, current reality. But the experience of achieving them is the domain that you're talking about, the experiential or more spiritual domain. So plenty of people achieve goals totally misaligned and feeling like crap.
Yeah.
They're able to push through their negative feelings. But it's not likely if someone is still listening right now. So I just want you to know, like, we lost a ton of listeners a long time ago because what we were talking about for them was not aligned with the way that they wanted to see the world. But for our listener who is listening right now, that person needs to tend the garden of their experience and how they feel. Because negative feelings for that person, for our listener right now, those negative feelings are essentially little signals and indicators that they're off track and that they're focusing in the wrong direction.
That's so rich. And I want to be cognizant of the time. I obviously know you're probably busy with the schedule. Matthew, if somebody wanted more proximity to you, next event that you're throwing or workshop that you're putting together, can you share anything that's
we tend to do a couple of workshops every year. During COVID, we kind of got shut down just like everybody else. I think that the best way to connect with me is to actually just go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. Then we'll just keep you apprised of whatever you've got going. We also have ways in which people can go find my book. I think finding my book is probably a really valuable first start for people. Quiet Mind, Epic Life. And then maybe the last thing is to consider joining us for a 9-month adventure in our mastermind. And we do every September we launch our mastermind, then we start it in October. And the objective of the mastermind is essentially to live a kick-ass life totally and completely at peace. So to be killing it in your life, but to be killing it without the stress and angst and anxiety and pressure and urgency and all the stuff that ruins your experience. Like, why are you trying to succeed and have a crappy life in the process, hoping that once you're there, it'll get better? It won't. Wherever you go, you'll still be there. So you'll be successful and be living a stressed out, anxiety-filled, crappy life. That to me seems irrational.
Yeah.
So we do a 9-month deep dive mastermind to reorient ourselves to essentially enlightened prosperity.
Great. So if somebody wanted to get involved in that, they could go to your website?
Please, MatthewFerry.com. 2 T's and 2 R's, MatthewFerry.com. And also connect with me on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm actually pretty active there in terms of connecting with people.
Yeah, it's to be honest, I was surprised that Matthew responded when I reached out, and I'm surprised that you don't have the following that you deserve. And I am happy that you're actually starting to expose yourself, because we got you early, and I'm super happy that we did, because this was extremely valuable.
Well, sometimes you have to retreat from the world in order to get clear about what it is that you're committed to. And I would say that when I got divorced in 2013, I went through a lot of reconsideration, and that reconsideration period, I think, is over now. And so now it is time to come forward with the rapid enlightenment process and do it in a way that is, has diligence and integrity. So thanks for acknowledging that.
Yeah,
Of course.
Last thing I will promote is that if you're ever feeling down, Matthew has a really good, it's like, did you actually make the music yourself over affirmations? I know it's not Baruch music.
Oh, yeah. No, I did. Yeah.
there's an energy to
Energy
that.
affirmations.
Yep. There's an energy to that you get. You can't actually be pissed after listening to it for a few minutes. You find yourself nodding and you're just like, this is not a rap song, but it just feels good. It's really awesome.
Yep.
Well, Matthew,
Yeah, Energy Affirmations 2 was designed really to give people a alternative to all the negative music that's out there, or music that's about sex and love and whatever. And it's about about living a positive, uplifting life and using affirmation in the process.
Yeah, it's super powerful and it's great. There's so much value in this. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on. Absolute pleasure. So grateful for you coming on, and I've learned a lot.
Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Kiro.
Thank you.
Awesome.